Hello, everyone. Thank you for taking the time and for tuning in. My name is Jared Tabor, and today we'll be looking at the pros.com industry report for freelance language professionals for 2023. The full written report will come out a little bit later this year, but I wanted to take advantage of this event for International Translation Day to kind of give you an overview of some of the things that will be found in that report. My guess is that in my time at pros.com so far, something around 2 million translators, interpreters, and other language professionals have received at least one email from me. Some of you may have received more than one. Now, one of the really nice things about that is not being marked as spam by a million language professionals, but it's the thousands and thousands of conversations, ongoing conversations that open up. Getting to talk to professionals all over the world in all stages of their career about what's going on with them and what they're going through is often more insightful than a well-placed survey. So around 2010 or 2011, we noticed there are industry reports out there that can be had, but these all seem geared towards the buyer of translation or language services companies. There wasn't really anything substantial about and for the freelancer. So pros.com began to publish these reports. The purpose of an industry report is not to shock you, surprise you, or anything like that. It's transmitting all of these experiences and things that are going on with other freelancers on a wider scale so that you can use them as a point of comparison for your own experiences. So let's get started. First, let's take a quick look at the list of concerns for the freelance language professional in 2023. This is a list that for quite a few years was pretty much static. Getting more or new clients has always been top of the list. It probably always will be because, let's be honest, if you can't get clients, the rest of the concerns really don't matter anymore, do they? But in recent years, in the past 2 or 3 years, this list has kind of started to shuffle itself up a bit. And some of the movement on this list, it might be interesting. For example, the downward pressure on rates, which has been going on for years and years, has moved down on the list of concerns, as has the tight turnaround that is being required for projects. One possibility for this is that I don't want to say that we're resigned to the fact that there's always going to be downward pressure on rates, but it's been going on for a while and it will continue. We're all doing more, and not necessarily for an equally more amount of pay, but a lot of the advances that have been going on that have led to great leaps in productivity, for example, make this less of a concern. And so if we're doing things quicker and more efficiently and more easily, then a little bit of downward pressure on rates does become a little less concerning. Likewise, with the tight turnaround times for projects, which were a greater concern in previous years, again, we're doing more and we're able to do it more easily. So that tight deadline is less of an issue. Some things that have moved up on the list: work-life balance. We saw this in the industry report for last year. As of the pandemic, when everyone was taking time by force to evaluate their work, their life, and other things, and making adjustments, this kind of came out of nowhere and appeared on the list. And this year it's at number 2, replacing the rates concern. Maintaining existing clients and staying up to date on tech have also moved up on the list. I think the tech concern makes a lot of sense, especially right now when we're being bombarded daily, sometimes hourly, with new things in tech that are making an impact inside and outside the industry. Maintaining existing clients may also have something to do with tech and being up to date and keeping efficiency up to demand. So I wanted to take a few moments now and have a look at a portion I'm going to call How Are We Doing? If you enjoy charts, you might enjoy this section. I'm going to try and do it in such a way that at the same time we minimize the suffering of those who dislike charts. So I'm going to go through them fairly quickly if I can and just mention some points that stand out. You'll have access to these slides after the presentation for those of you who just love a good chart and want to pore over it with a little bit of leisure and a little bit of detail, which is probably how they're best digested. Clients, here we're looking at the division of clients either locally or outside the country where one resides. As you can see here, in most cases, a very good portion of clients are located outside of one's country. It's not a bad thing to work in the local market. I mean, a lot of local markets are good. There are a lot of advantages: language, time zones, communications, culture, payments are all a little bit easier. In some cases, however, depending on the country where you're living, working outside of the country and in currency which may be stronger than the local currency is beneficial, even though that also opens up some difficulties, which are the same as we just mentioned: time zones, language, culture, access to payments. One of the great advantages that a freelancer has is the ability to cross those borders, those frontiers between countries, and work in a stronger currency if they want to. So if you're one of the people who may be at the moment working exclusively in your local market, and the country where you're residing, maybe cost of living is difficult, there's devaluation of currency and so forth, you may want to start looking beyond the borders and picking up a client or two outside. Mobility, here we just looked at people who reside part of the time, at least part of the year, in a different country. We're talking maybe 2 to 3 months, in some cases 6 to 8 months in a different country, almost 12%. There was a relatively low percentage of people who had moved either within the country where they were living or to another country over the past 5 years where cost of living was a factor. Gross income from language services. Here what we're looking at are people who identify as full-time freelance language professionals, right? If we were to include part-timers, these numbers would be different, but these are stats from people who are in the game full-time. So a healthy percentage there, receiving 100% of their income from language services. Possibly a concerning percentage receiving less than 50%, but I'm not sure. That there may be some mix there where people are combining incomes from their partner and so on. Just over 34% are the sole breadwinner in their household. That looks like a nicer percentage than it is. Somewhere around 23% of language professional households are also households of just one person. So that would also explain why that percentage is so high. Gross incomes from language services. Now, when we get to asking people about money, about the numbers, I would encourage everyone to, these particular charts may be interesting. Take them with a huge grain of salt. A lot of strange things start to happen when you ask people about money. It's in some cases it's a cultural thing. In many cases, you'll find that freelancers don't necessarily know what they're making per year. They've got a lot of different little payments coming in from different sources in different currencies. If they're keeping track, they've got to make the exchange, all sorts of strange things. They may have thought I was, reporting them to the tax man. Who knows? But I would just take this as kind of an interesting point of reference, which is not too reliable necessarily. So that percentage, which is reporting less than 10,000 a year, and this is expressed in US dollars, is concerning. I don't think it's as concerning as it looks here, but still. The portion of this graph that that I wonder about is the very far right end. I don't know if we have some jokesters. I know that these people exist. They're out there. They're doing it. But the percentage reporting more than 100,000 a year seems a little bit high. If those are real people, drop me a line. I want to meet you. I want to be your friend. Freelancers were also asked to compare their gross income from language services to the average income for their main country of residence. Again, this is kind of a tricky one. How do you compare? What do you compare? What do you use as a point of comparison? In some countries or some cases, the point of comparison isn't there or it's unreliable. And in some cases, the average for a country is not good, right? So to ask people about, how much they earn and comparing how much they earn to how much other people earn, that's fine. But I think it's a lot more significant, a lot more meaningful to look at how people feel about what they are earning and what they're able to do with what they're earning. So I think it's a lot more insightful to look here at how people feel about their annual income from language services. You'll see the first three lines I think are pretty positive, from getting by to, well, it could be better, but I'm doing pretty well, up to, I've got what I need. I'm able to do everything I want to do. That still leaves a concerning percentage of people who feel the need to supplement their income because they're not making ends meet, right? I'm based in Argentina, and this last weekend I was able to attend a local event for translators and interpreters here in the city where I live, La Plata, that was held by one of the colegios here, the Colegio de Traductores Públicos y Intérpretes de la Provincia de Buenos Aires. Shout out to everyone over there. It was a great event. I had a lot of fun, and I got the chance to speak a little bit about some of the topics that we're seeing here today. And for that talk, I came across some numbers which I thought were interesting, a comparison among freelance translators and interpreters here in Argentina versus the rest of the world, which I know there are all sorts of caveats to doing that. But I thought it might be interesting to point them out here. One thing freelancers were asked in relation to their earnings and what they're able to do was if they're able to regularly put aside some of their earnings into savings. And I found it interesting that in a country like Argentina, where inflation is an issue, as in other places, right? But it's been particularly notable the fact that freelance language professionals are a good portion of them are still able to put aside earnings into savings on a regular basis. Another standout point that I came across was this, which has to do with keeping your rates up to date. Now, I'm not sure exactly if this is because, here in Argentina, we're used to watching the prices of things go up as you're looking at them, considering whether or not you want to buy them. But freelance language professionals here seem to have been pretty well on the ball as far as adjusting their rates. You'll see a high percentage of them did so during 2023. In many other parts of the world, this has been a problem over the past few years. There were many people who, at the start of the pandemic or during the pandemic, when inflation started happening to a greater degree in most parts of the world, a lot of people said, well, now is not the time maybe to adjust my rates. I don't want to hike my prices up now. It's difficult for everyone. Now, what happened then was we got through the pandemic and, in most cases, things began to stabilize. And then it wasn't the right time either. You couldn't come out with a rate hike out of nowhere when suddenly things were getting back to quote unquote normal. So a lot of people got stuck, and now maybe it's been 3 years or more since they've adjusted their rates, and they don't quite know when or how to do that. One way of approaching that is to take advantage of new client contact to introduce new rates. I mean, you can adjust your rates across the board. That can be very difficult to do. or you can selectively start adjusting your rates, and you little by little get up to where you need them to be. Everyone loves a discount, of course, and good clients will accept a discount if you offer it to them. But good clients also are, in general, looking for specialists, and they know that a specialist might cost a little bit more because they'll get the job done right, they'll get it done quicker. So it may be a good idea, when you can, to resist that pressure that you might feel, either from the client or from yourself, to give in to the discount. If you do, make it clear, right? You don't want your discount to become your new standard rate. This next one, different surcharges and possibly discounts that people are offering. I'll put this up here just to give you some ideas. You know, if there's something here that you're not doing, maybe consider adopting it. And then finally, in this section, people were asked if they're on track to make at least as much, if not more than they did it last year. Again, this is one of those where, you know, I'm not too sure. And again, all of those freelancers who don't really have a good handle on how much they're making annually may not have any idea if they're going to make the same in 2023, because they don't necessarily know what they made in 2022. Okay, so to give your eyes a rest from the charts for at least one slide, here's a timeline of a few of the bigger advances in tech which have had a direct impact on quality, productivity, and accessibility in the language services industry. Fortunately, everyone watching this has jumped on board with computers, but we'll take a look at the adoption rates for some of these newer advances in just a moment. And before we do, though, I wanted to mention that earlier this year, two other smaller industry reports were published, one dealing with CAT tools, and the other report had to do with interpreting. And I wanted to just make mention of it here, what we're calling transinterpretation, the phenomena where more translators are going into interpreting as well as translation, and more interpreters are also becoming translators. This is brought about by many different factors, but between 30 and 40% of freelance language professionals in 2023 offer both services to one degree or another. At the same time, remote interpreting has been on the rise and continues. Around 80 to 85% of interpreting is happening remotely. If you're interested in interpreting or getting into interpreting, I recommend you look at that report as well. So here we have the percentage of professionals using CAT tools over time, percentages of professionals adopting machine translation or MT over time. And I've also included on this chart percentages of people offering post-editing or PEMT as a service, since they are closely related to CAT tools and MT. You'll see that the curve for CAT tools is pretty gradual. You could walk it easily. The curves for things like MT and PEMT start to get a little bit steeper. You might have a little bit of difficulty running up those curves. In November of 2022, the world received ChatGPT, and that leads us to this next chart where we see the curve of adoption for AI. Here we're talking mostly about large language models, LLMs, like ChatGPT or Bard or Claude and so on. Notice that this is not year to year, this is month to month, and the curve is much steeper than those we just saw. As of September of this year, around 43% of translators are using an LLM or similar for some tasks, right? They're not necessarily using it for straight up translation, although there are people who are doing that. There are all sorts of uses that they're finding for these LLMs that are making them faster and better. It can be anything from investigating terms or investigating a field to setting up a quick glossary, communicating with clients, putting together a CV or a portfolio. The uses are not limited solely to translation, although it's getting pretty good at that too. One thing that is important to mention here is that, well, with a cat tool, one can estimate that on average, you get maybe 20 to 30% more efficient. With MT, probably about the same. Among translators using LLMs or AI for their work, the average reported increase in productivity is 45%. That's a pretty big jump in productivity. Now, I'm going to take a pause and sidetrack you a little bit. I'm going to tell you about Pros.com translation contests. Pros.com translation contests started in 2008, I believe. And these contests are different from the traditional translation contest, principally in that they are peer-based, right? So instead of having a jury of experts who decide who the winners are in a language pair, the translations are evaluated by peers working in those same pairs. Some people don't like the fact that there isn't a grand jury deciding the winners, but this peer-based approach, on the one hand, is a little bit truer to real life and how things are done in the work, in the commercial side of translation. And on the other hand, they also allow these contests to reach a lot more people. You can have a contest where you have 215, 230 language pairs. And because you don't have to put together 230 juries to make decisions, more people are able to participate. The contest consists of different source texts. They're usually 300 to 500 words long. They're fun, but slightly challenging texts. The idea is basically to have fun. Some people take it quite seriously, which is also okay. There's an advantage to winning a translation contest. You get a winner's ribbon in your Pros.com profile, and nowadays every little thing you can do to stand out, to differentiate yourself is welcome, right? But many people do it just to have a little bit of fun, to take a break from, if you're doing technical translations all day long, it can be, kind of refreshing to take a break and try something new. You can hone your skills. It's a good chance to get feedback on your translation skills, to network. So that brings me to a friend of mine that I want to introduce to those of you who don't know him already. We first introduced him in 2019 in the industry report for 2019. Let me present GoTrans. GoTrans was generated in 2009, and he was designed to be an expression of pure machine translation as an experiment to see how machine translation was really stacking up against human translations. GoTrans works in every possible language pair he can get his hands on, and as the name implies, he started out, at least, using Google Translate. However, like a good translator, GoTrans will leverage any new technology or tool that comes along which may help him translate better. GoTrans loves a good translation contest. He wants to compete, and he wants someday to win. Since his inception, GoTrans has submitted entries in translation contests in as many pairs as he can. So in the beginning, poor guy, he just didn't have any luck. Wasn't able to rise in the rankings. What you're looking at here these are admin interfaces which are used to monitor the activity in the contest, to see how things are being evaluated, rated, voted on. And I've removed the names of the participants to protect people's identities. You'll just see GoTrans where he's positioned. So here we see English to Spanish in 2009. GoTrans was just getting started, and immediately people were able to detect this pure MT output, obviously. GoTrans doesn't get his feelings hurt, so this wasn't a big problem for him. He also doesn't sleep and he doesn't get tired, so he was in it for the long run. Now, this went on for about 10 years until 2019. As I said, GoTrans doesn't limit himself to just one tool. He'll take on whatever it takes to be better. So in 2019, GoTrans switched to DeepL in the languages where it was available. And for the first time, he was able to receive a positive comment here and there from different human translators. And the ratings that he was getting on some of his entries in some language pairs began to improve. Here we can see the same language pair, English to Spanish, and in the qualification phase, at least at this point, he was ranked as 12th. November 2022, ChatGPT comes out. GoTrans says, hello, when is the next translation contest? The next translation contest opened up in July of this year. It's the 31st translation contest that's been held. There are source texts available in English, Spanish, French, Italian, and in Indonesian. The contest is currently open. You can vote now if you want to in your language pairs. There are 114 language pairs in competition. And again, as I mentioned before, it's all peer evaluation. In this instance, GoTrans decided to participate in 30 different language pairs. Why only 30 and not 114? The truth is because Jared got tired of copying and pasting the output into GoTrans's entries. All of the entries that GoTrans made in this contest were straight ChatGPT output, right? So input the source text, get the output, copy, paste. It hasn't been touched by a human. So in this contest also, GoTrans, in some language pairs, in some cases, received a positive comment. You know, this is a good term selection, that sort of thing, along with the negative comments. In some language pairs, he was able to rank higher in the qualifications phase. The evaluations of his translations were a little bit higher than some of the human participants. In the qualifications phase of this contest, GoTrans was also eliminated in 20 of the language pairs where he was participating before they reached the finals. But before doing so, he was able to, let's say, quote unquote, beat a few humans. And here you see some of the language pairs where the entry made by GoTrans was ranked higher than some of the humans and the number of humans that he beat in those pairs. Here you can see a screen where GoTrans is ranked during the qualifications phase and the ranking that he was receiving. A lot of this will fluctuate and move up and down during the different phases of the contest depending on the number of peers coming into the contest to evaluate or vote. Now, if GoTrans could feel anything, there would be this big digital smile on his face because for the first time in 2023, during this contest, he reached the finals in 10 different language pairs. Here, what you can see, again, is the admin interface during the voting phase, again with the other participants' names and entry numbers removed. What we're looking at are 3 different shots on 3 different days during the voting phase. In a language pair which is still in competition, so I can't disclose that at the moment. But here you can see that GoTrans, fairly early on in the finals, was ranked first. In the second shot, you can see that points started to accumulate as peers came in and began to vote. He's still in first, but they're gaining on him. And in the third shot, you can see that, okay, he's dropped down to second. And what I expect will happen is that as more and more peers vote, what tends to generally happen is the best translations float to the top. And GoTrans will continue to drop in the rankings. But what's significant here is that translated output from ChatGPT, without any post-editing, without any corrections from a human, was good enough to make it to the finals in the translation contest and to fool, let's say, some of the human translators evaluating those translations. Now, I'm not telling you this with the intention of scaring anyone or anything like that. This is, I think, a very concrete illustration of what this particular tool can do on its own without the intervention of a human. So imagine what it can do with a human at the control. When I was but a young lad, I read a series of books by the author Fred Saberhagen. He wrote this fantasy series about 12 swords that had been created by the gods. Each sword had a special power or ability. For example, there was a sword that could slay dragons. There was a sword that could cut stone. There was a sword that would help you find your way to wherever you were going. But each of these swords also had a sort of drawback or a trap built into it, so to speak. The sword that slayed dragons was great at slaying dragons, but it wouldn't protect the user. So maybe you could kill that dragon, but you might end up dead in the process. The sword that helped you find your way would take you there, wherever you wanted to go, but it would also take the riskiest or the most dangerous route to get there. And while I was looking at this Go Trans activity leading up to this presentation, I found myself thinking about those books. And to use an analogy that is terribly unmodern to talk about these modern things, I think we can say that ChatGPT, any LLM, any kind of technology nowadays is a bit like those swords. Technology is a sword that is really, really good and it cuts really, really well. It'll get the thing done. But a sword needs a swordsman. A good sword needs a good swordsman. We're not at a point where a sword by itself can get the thing done. We're at a point where the good swordsman can get a really, really good, really sharp sword to slay all of those dragons. One more thing. We're also at a point where, and this has been happening for years, but it's becoming increasingly apparent or important, of concern. Clients are finding it difficult, increasingly difficult, to know who the experts are, who the specialists are, who the good translators and interpreters are. It's far too easy nowadays to present as a specialist. It's far too easy to present as a human. So it's no longer, and we've said this before, it's no longer enough to say you are something. You have to be that thing and show that you're that thing. Just briefly, we'll give some recommendations. These are very general, and I think we've been talking about them for years, but it never hurts to brush up or have a reminder. The first one, of course, is specialize. We've been talking about this specialize for years now. If you don't know it already, know that the good clients are looking for specialists because the good clients know that a specialist can do it better and faster. And a specialist, because of that, can charge more and can make more money. Become and stay an expert. Here, when I say expert, maybe it's kind of confusing. When I just talked about becoming a specialist. Here I'm talking about something maybe slightly different. You can become an expert in your field, but you can also become an expert in something like tech as applied to translation or interpreting. If you're an expert on the use of an LLM applied to translation, that not only benefits you, but it benefits your client. When your clients come asking about leveraging an LLM for work, you're prepared. You know how to answer their questions and how to guide them towards the best solution. Incorporate the new. Here we're talking perhaps mostly about technology. If you're not experimenting with an LLM now, start. Find out how it works. Find out how you can leverage it. Can it help you translate faster? Can it help you put together glossaries faster? Can it help you investigate, research what you need to research faster? If so, incorporate it. But we're also talking about other things as well, as I mentioned towards the top. If you're not charging a minimum fee for work, maybe consider incorporating that as well, and so on. And then finally, as we've mentioned before, if you're a freelance language professional, you're running a business, you are the business, and anyone running a business who does not invest in that business is going to go out of business. So invest in your business, invest in yourself. Remember that there are a lot of free resources for just about anything out there nowadays. And a lot of what is paid is not all that expensive. Consider it an investment, something that will pay off because you'll get proficient in it and you'll use it, you'll put it to work, and you'll get returns on it. And that brings us to the end of the presentation. I will be with you shortly for any questions you may have. So thank you.